All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and kick things off today. Very impressed that we were given the big room. Unfortunately, we haven't filled it quite as well as we did yesterday, so hopefully people continue to filter in. So I'm Ryan Galluzzo from NIST Applied Cybersecurity Division, where I'm the identity program lead. My primary role there is to kind of help coordinate across various different projects, various different efforts that we have going on around identity, and help coordinate amongst our different programs. So I'll be giving a quick overview of our identity roadmap today, and then handing it off to my colleagues who are going to walk through a few very specific aspects of different objectives we have to, that we're attempting to achieve, strategic outcomes that we're looking for, and some activities we have going on. But before we do that, I wanted to give a quick opportunity for them to introduce themselves as well.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. My name is Ketan Mehta. I work at NIST Computer Security Division, and most of my work has been involved in writing standards for PIV, which is our federal government-based solution. And we've also been involved in FIDO, been involved in WebAuthn, and lately I've been involved in the mobile driving license standard, which is for the international standards ISO 18013.
And I'm Andy Regenscheid, also from the Computer Security Division at NIST, where I'm the technical lead for our PIV Standards program. I'm also the lead for our applied cryptography program at NIST, where I work on a variety of projects tied to platform integrity, digital identity, and network protocols.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, so before we dive in and get into the details, quick audience participation thing. Who here knows what the NIST is and what the NIST does? Wow, fantastic. That is pretty much everybody. I guess just to give the very super 10,000 foot level, our name is pretty self-explanatory. We do National Institute of Standards and Technologies. We do development of standards. We do research, and we do measurement science. All with a focus on attempting to advance U.S. economic interests, quality of life, and improvement of security overboard. So when it comes to it, we do those standards, and we do that standards development work in a very broad spectrum of opportunities. It wouldn't be a NIST presentation if I didn't at least bring up our standard reference peanut butter. So we actually have a very, very expensive jar of peanut butter that is the standard reference material for all of the peanut butter and all the caloric stuff that you all do. It's for research purposes. But again, we do everything from standard reference materials to work on cryptography, as Andy is one of our experts in, to work on physical materials in our physical measurements laboratory, pretty much everything across the board. Everyone here, though, is from our information technology lab, and in keeping with the theme of obviously named things, in the information technology lab, we do work on information technology standards and guidance. And within that lab, we have our identity program. And so this is a multidisciplinary team of folks who work on, identity experts, cryptographers, mathematicians, privacy experts, policy advisors, usability specialists, biometrics experts, you name it. It is a large collection of nerds nerds is okay? You guys like that? Yeah. Okay. Who focus on nothing but trying to advance identity and identity-specific projects. And within that realm, we have kind of 5 core things, 5 artifacts that we typically focus on. One is creating guidance. For those of you who were at our presentation yesterday, one of our key kind of marquee items is the special publication 863, our digital identity guidelines, and all the volumes that go in there. But these guidelines, these guidance, they're created for federal agencies, but often adopted by the commercial sector. They really provide our requirements, things like architectures, things like security and privacy considerations that need to be taken into account, encapsulated in different topics. From a standards development perspective, for the federal space, we create things called the Federal Information Processing Standards, or FIPS. Some of you might be familiar with them from FIPS 201, which is our personal identity verification standard, or FIPS 140, which is some of our cryptographic validation standards. But those are things that we do as far as federal standards, but we also engage very, very heavily in the commercial, international standard space. So if there is an acronym out there that works on standards development, ISO, W3C, IETF, IEEE, NIST is typically involved and or sometimes in the lead in helping to develop and engage on some of those standards. We conduct foundational and applied research, and wanted to make sure we put both those on there and didn't just kind of lump it into doing research, but we have 2 different types that we really focus on within the organization and within the identity program. Foundational research, which is really focused on pre-standardization. How do we understand new and emerging technologies? How do we understand new concepts that are coming out? And how can we start to set the stage for what we need to do within the standards realm? How do we identify potential gaps in the standard space? And how do we make a plan for starting to get engaged in those? From an applied research perspective, this is where we already probably have a standard, or there's a standard we've released, or there's guidance we've released. How do we start taking a look at those and understanding where there's additional research within the realm of implementation that we need to start thinking about? You know, what kind of tools need to be developed? What kind of advancement needs to be made around things like metrics and measurement? And that's how we kind of transition from the word, from the standard, from the text, into stuff that is a little bit more focused on implementation. And that rolls very nicely into the concept of enabling transition to practice. So a lot of this work is done within our National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, the NCCOE. Just going to keep throwing out acronyms, catch them, look them up later. But within the NCCOE, we focus on really taking that applied research and bridging the gap to do actual builds to our standards, to international standards, to be able to give agencies and organizations the ability to go from that text into code and give them kind of how-to guides, these practice guides that we develop, for how you can actually implement to the standards. And Ketan will do some discussion of some of the work we're doing there around mobile driver's license and credentials in the future. We focus on enhancing metrology. Within the identity space, this is something that is a little bit less mature than some of the other places where we do metrology, but there are places where it is advanced, and there are some standards around how we measure performance. So we're looking at things like, you know, our biometrics program, our face recognition vendor testing program run out of our image group. They do a lot of evaluation, a lot of study of how these products perform, how they evaluate, and they give kind of an open place for some of those things to be assessed. So we're looking at how can we continue to enhance metrology, not just in the biometric space, but more broadly across identity. How can we measure these things? So in putting together this program and getting this program kind of moving, you know, one of the things we wanted to do is start to communicate more broadly what are our priorities, what are the things we're looking to work on, what are the activities we're starting to think about. And so earlier this year we made the decision we'd really like to put out a roadmap, something that is able to lay out, here's what we are focusing on, here's some of the things we're considering to make sure that we could achieve two things, essentially two core focuses. One, internally amongst ourselves, make sure we are communicating and engaging and aligning on what are our priorities. What are the things we really want to achieve, and how do we make sure we're prioritizing our resources and our efforts to achieve those outcomes. Objective number two is making sure that we started to communicate and engage with the people here, with you all, with our partners out in industry, with our partners in the federal space, to make sure we can communicate and provide input on what we're focusing on, and make sure we're aligning more broadly as well too, but also receive feedback to make sure what we're doing is aligning to what broader industry is doing and where trends are heading within the space. So the roadmap was published in April of this year. I'm guessing some of you did not get the message that the comment period was extended to June 16th because my email absolutely exploded last night with feedback and input. If you are wondering, and we'll talk about that later, it is open for public comment. It is a draft. We do really want feedback, and the public comment period doesn't close until June 16th, so immediately after this, go read it and provide some feedback to us. That'd be fantastic. It's only 10 pages. We're not asking for you to read 863 again. So what do we contain inside this? One of the things we wanted to do is make sure we covered a few key topics. We wanted to make sure we had a concept of guiding principles. So what are the things we want to try and integrate into all the work that we're doing and all the projects that we're doing, and make sure they're reflected in each one of them. We'll also talk a little bit about some of our strategic objectives, which provide priorities, but wanted to focus on these principles first. Enhanced security and privacy. That's kind of table stakes for anything within a place that has an organization called Applied Cybersecurity Division and the Computer Security Division. We want to make sure that we are doing research and engagement that stays ahead of the threat models, what the threat actors are doing, to make sure our guidance and the work that we're doing stays up to pace with it. From a privacy perspective, though, one of the things we're really focused on, we have an entire privacy engineering team that works with us here. How do we actually transition from focusing very heavily on policy as a manner of instituting privacy and start transitioning to actual technology and approaches within the engineering space that can help preserve and protect privacy. So we're working very closely with that team to identify how can we apply things like privacy enhancing technology to fraud models. How can we apply those to information sharing models to make sure that we're actually preserving and protecting privacy, not just by click box privacy, but through technology. Fostering equity and individual choice. This has been a pretty popular topic over the past few days. If you were in our session yesterday, you know this is one of the things we're also really working very heavily on in 863. We want to make sure that we're providing the ability for organizations to be able to assess and evaluate and iteratively improve how they actually include larger groups and larger audiences in their implementations of identity solutions. There's still a long way to go here, a very long way to go here. But right now we're focused on how we can evaluate those things, what frameworks we can help build out, and how we can integrate it better into all of our documentation and all of our guidance going forward. We want to promote usability and accessibility. Again, this goes pretty hand in hand with a lot of the stuff we want to do from an equity and individual choice perspective, but how do we evaluate and understand where the technology is going to identify additional options that we can bring to the table for individuals to successfully identity proof, authenticate, share and maintain their own information, and how can we integrate those into our guidance and really make sure that every project we do has an aspect of usability to it. So if we're going to do something in the NCCOE, how do we make sure we've got a UI component that can be evaluated, measured, and understood, and provide guidance to agencies and organizations as they start to think about not just the technology and the interoperability, but the actual user interface. And we have a wonderful usable cybersecurity group that we work with very regularly at NIST that focuses on a broad range of topics and how you can bring cybersecurity more effectively to the end user. We want to enhance interoperability and standardization. That's pretty simple and straightforward. We do standards, we do engagement within standards bodies. We want to make sure things are as consistent and usable for the audience as possible. And finally, we want to improve measurement and transparency. Again, this is something that I kind of touched on the previous slide, but what are the areas where we continue to enhance how we're measuring things? How can we make things more quantifiable at the end of the day? And how can we give organizations a better set of tools to allow them to understand what a good solution is and what an effective solution is? So what are our objectives? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because there are a lot of objectives. So one of the things I did want to point out is, despite the fact that I think there's 8 of them on here, this is spread across multiple different divisions within NIST, across multiple different projects within NIST, and the goal is to execute these over a multi-year process. So not all these things are going to be done next year when we come back here to Identiverse, but we're going to be hopefully making incremental progress on each one of these. First thing on here is accelerating implementation and adoption of MDL and user-controlled identities. This is a key priority for us. Ketan's going to talk in much more detail about it later, so I'm not going to dive in now, but really focusing on some of the concepts we've been hearing: mobile driver's license, verifiable credentials, and how do those fit into what we're doing in the future. We want to expand and enhance our biometric and identity measurement programs. Again, we've got face recognition vendor testing. To date, they've done a number of new tracks. They're even starting to add more. I think in December they released at least 3 new tracks. How do we differentiate twins? How do we deal with morph detection, which is essentially when you take an image of a good user and an image of an attacker and morph those to try and defeat an algorithm. So how good are algorithms at detecting that? And then presentation attack detection as well. They have a few more that they're looking to lean towards that are discussed in the roadmap and that are even kind of still emerging as well too. So how do we continue to take that to the next level? As well as what other measurements and what other programs like that can we start to stand up for other aspects of identity? I want to promote technologies that enable authoritative attribute validation. I want to be very, very clear. We do not have the authority to tell agencies and organizations that they have to make their attributes available to anyone. What we do want to do is be able to provide the guidance and the structures and the architectures that could potentially be used by those agencies to effectively make authoritative attributes more available for identity proofing purposes, for eligibility purposes, for authorization purposes. This is something that I think for a long time, both government and commercial side have really wanted to do. So what we want to do is be able to set some of the foundations for them to be able to do that. We want to advance secure, private, usable, equitable identity proofing and fraud mitigation options. So again, this is looking at what are some emerging technologies, how can we better integrate them, how can we understand them to know where there are trade-offs between security, privacy, and potentially equity. But also what can we do, again, going back to some of the work we've done with our privacy enhancing technology team, to apply privacy enhancing technologies to some of these use cases to potentially improve both the ability to detect fraud as well as the preservation of people's privacy. We want to accelerate the use of phishing-resistant modern multi-factor authentication. Andy talked in great depth yesterday about what we're doing on phishing resistance as far as the 863 guidance goes. We're also looking to develop a series of guidance in the future that will help people understand not just how to implement and develop and deploy these kinds of technologies, but how we can speak to different audiences. So how can we explain to the executive why this is important for them? How can we explain to the individual why this is valuable to them? And then also how can we help the developers move forward on it? Want to modernize our federal PIV guidance and infrastructure. Andy's going to talk about this in greater detail, but again, this is how do we take a lot of this emerging technology and make sure we can make use of it within the federal enterprise. We want advanced dynamic authorization and access control schemes. Again, we have an entire team at NIST that works on access control pretty exclusively. Dave Ferriola leads that team. He's worked very extensively on things like the next generation access control tools and standards and specs that are out there, and how do we take those and marry those up with some of the things we're starting to see emerge from a zero trust perspective. And finally, we want to promote greater federation and interoperability of identity solutions. We're just going to keep saying this over and over and over again. It's going to be a principle, it's going to be an objective, it's going to be a work stream, however you want to describe it. So, I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, but really starting to think about what's that next layer down from things like 863C and 800.217, which are our federation documents, to dealing with profiles, to dealing with how we actually get some of the specifications targeted towards what we want. So that's a big, and international interoperability as well too. So that's a big focus for us. So that's the kind of 10,000 foot view of the roadmap itself at this point in time and some of the objectives. I'm going to hand off now to Ketan, who's going to talk through accelerating implementation and adoption of MDL.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I think maybe, Ryan, we can call ourselves substances as opposed to nodes.
Yeah,
so
there's this guy.
That should be okay. Okay, so I want to talk about accelerating implementation of MDLs. So my first slide is, why is this important? There are a lot of things, there are a lot of moving parts out there, and a lot of people are doing different things, and it's kind of hard to have any coherence as to how can you trust a credential, right? So why the work we do is important. As already we know, there are a lot of people here that know NIST. So what we do is basically write standards and standards and standards, right? So if I'm on the wrong side of the road, everybody knows I'm on the wrong side of the road. If I get pulled over, I have to accept the fact that I'm on the wrong side of the road. So if we don't have standards, then there will be chaos, right? So that's what we do, and what we are about to do for driving license, and then eventually for digital identities, it's very important. So more people look at this, more people get involved, better it is. So what's going on? What are we working on? If I look at digital identity or online digital identity, the world that we're heading towards, we know there are like two separate worlds. First world is the one where there's an account that is set up online, and this account is accessible through user IDs, passwords, passkeys, and other authentication mechanisms that enable someone access to their online services. Now we are looking into providing digital identity information online, such as verifiable claims that identifies someone, and that is presented to an online service, which eventually gives you access to the services that you need. So these are two very different two worlds. If a relying party has set up an account, issued a credential, then they're trusted. It's not very difficult. But if somebody else has issued a credential and the relying party is depending on authenticating that credential or using that credential, then they need to be able to trust that credential. So how do you establish trust in that credential, right? That's very important. And right now we don't have anything in place for this, and we can start, and a lot of us are starting to work towards this trust framework. So that's the most important piece that we kind of will work on in the future. So as far as the trust is concerned, you need interoperability, you need technical standards that support interoperability, that establishes some baseline for security and privacy. And in last few years, we have been working in the international standards for 18013, which is the standard for mobile driving license. Part 5 is for the attended use cases, and Part 7 is for the unattended use cases, which basically means online transactions. So the 18013 document defines, or the standard defines what's called mobile document. Our first mobile document is actually a mobile driving license. Driving license is not just really your driving privilege, but it's really getting used as an identity document, right? So I think that's probably the most important document that we'll probably have in terms of accessing, in terms of use of a digital identity online. So I'll tell you a little bit about what the standard already provides. So it is a definition of a mobile document, and our first use case is mobile driving license, and it could be extended to other documents. So that's why we call it mobile document. The part 7 that we are defining, it's currently in a draft stage. It already defines a verifiable credential presentation form. So that's a good thing because we want to merge with the existing infrastructure. It supports reader authentication. So basically, anybody should not be able to get access to your PII. And so this can be worked out such that there's reader authentication, and so it is phishing resistant. It supports data minimization. So not everything in your driving license needs to be revealed to the relying party for a given transaction. So it supports data minimization. Only the data that you need can be revealed to the relying party. It provides end-to-end encryption between the receiver and the sender. So it ensures that no third party in middle is able to see your data, so that it provides that feature already. It also provides device authentication. So the device on which this credential was issued is the device where that credential was. It should not be copyable or counterfeitable as long as you have stored the private key that is authenticating the device that's in a secure area. And we are always insisting that you use secure area for implementing driving license on a mobile device. So from the get-go, we really want to have a proper implementation for driving license. The other thing that also this standard provides is a trust framework definition or trust framework possibility of a, so it already defines how the data is signed and how the trust lists are populated. And so for the driving license, it's kind of easier than many other document types in the sense that we already today accept states that have issued us physical cards as our driving license. Other people use it already, right? So the same states are going to issue driving license on your mobile device. So we kind of already trust the state's processes for the issuance. Although you have to go into the rigor of certification of the states issuing the mobile driving license. And it's great news that MY has stepped up and they're saying that they will do the digital trust service. So this digital trust service basically means that they're going to authorize or certify each state that is issuing an MDL to certain standard. So when that is done, then if you are a relying party, then you have some trust in the mobile driving license credential that you get. So we're already to a point where we have done quite a bit of driving license MDL standard testing. We have a reference implementation of the standard also, and we use that reference implementation of the standard to test against the products that are out there. So the MDL products that get tested. So there's a lot of testing that has already happened, and we continue to do the testing for the reference for the Part 5 standard and also Part 7 standard. So I guess a lot of things have worked out since 2021 when the standard came out. And the greatest news is that all the states have started to issue driving licenses. Not all of them, but states have started to issue driving licenses already. So there are, I think, 8 states that are issuing MDLs as we speak. And there are other states that are planning to implement MDL in their issuance systems. So we have early adopters for the issuance of the driving license. Now we need, on the same side, we need, on the other side, we need relying parties that are early adopters of the standard. And this is where we realize that, okay, it's easy to issue the standard, but it's hard to establish trust in someone else's credential. So how do we facilitate this trust, or how do we also come to know whether this works or it doesn't work? Is it trustable or not? So for that reason, we are starting a project in NCCOE, so National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. In this, it's a collaborative hub where industry, federal agencies, academia, they all come together to put together some solutions and do a demonstration of those solutions. And we also, at the end of this project, write down the how-to guide that guides people that have not done this yet, but they are thinking about doing this. So ultimately, basically, we'll put together maximum like 10 demonstrations of driving license use cases. And we have like 5 categories or 5 types of use cases. The first one is, of course, attended use cases, like where the police officer is pulling you over, or you're checking into a hotel, you're presenting your MDL in person. Then we have MDL that is used as an identity proofing document. Then MDL that is used as an attribute presentation, and then MDL that is used as an authenticator, and then an MDL that is used for single sign-on. So we have this range of categories, and we are not saying that they're all good uses of MDL, but we want to find out through this project what are the appropriate uses of MDL, and we'll put that in our guidelines. So we are inviting verifiers, relying parties who are interested in adopting this technology for the existing online presence. And so these participants can, with us, they can learn, we can teach also, and they can come along with their own verifiers, verifiers can come along with their own identity service providers, or we can help them providing the technical know-how for integrating MDL into their environment. Or they may already have an MDL solution, and if they're willing, we can demonstrate that in the NCCOE lab. So NCCOE lab is not just a physical location, it's also, this is all going to be virtual. So in future, I should be able to pull up my driving license on my phone and go to a website and do a presentation of my driving license. So we are inviting verifiers to participate in this. We are also inviting identity service providers to participate in this. We want some test driving licenses, also other documents maybe. So we're inviting issuers to participate in this. And we are also, we can include in the project trust service providers. So trust service providers are the entities that do the certification, and then they put a stamp on the certification process. So we are inviting that. More details are here on the nccoe.nist.gov/projects/digital identities MDL website. So go onto this website. We have a project description. You can also scroll down all the way to the bottom of the page where you can become a part of the community of interest. So you provide your name and email address, and you will then get automatic updates on this project. So currently, people have asked us for verifiable credentials. So the standard already supports that, and we will test this out. People have also asked us for issuance. Can you do some project on issuance? And at this point, we are not going to do issuance, but issuance is very, very important as well. The reason why it's important right now, state of Maryland, for example, that is issuing MDLs, they can issue an MDL to a particular wallet. But then they need to know that interface. They need to know if they trust that wallet. And so there's a lot of work in establishing trust in that wallet. And then how many documents are going to be on that wallet, how this document can be discovered on that wallet. All these things need to be defined. So that work is actually currently going on, and we plan to do a NCCOE project as well for issuance, but probably in the next phase. So that work is currently going on in 23 to 20. It's a building block for digital identity management on mobile devices. It includes things like issuance protocols, usage protocols. Like I said earlier, like how do you establish trust, right? So you need to have some common language for assurance levels. We have one scale in SP 863. Then there's EIDA scale for identity assurance levels. So in part 5, there's 23 to 20 part 5, we want to define some technical way of using a common language that issuer can then convey the assurance level to the relying party. So there's some information that needs to be in the document itself. And then part 6 is also important for 23 to 20, where we are going to define some attestation formats that could be used so that an issuer can establish trust in the device in which they will be issuing the credential. So you could have a biometric component on the device that has some characteristics and certified to it. And then you could have a crypto module on the device that has certain characteristics and could be attested to by the certifier. And then you could also have the app developer that uses these things and attestations to that. So there's a lot of work going on in this field of the issuance. So we will get into that later, but since currently MDLs are already being issued, I think it's important to see its usage and it's done properly. So that's what we are working on right now. More information is on this NCCOA website, and I'll be here to answer any questions afterwards as well. So thank you so much. Wow.
Thanks. So, yes, I know. How do I use it?
The green one.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, so as many of you know, it's been nearly 20 years since Homeland Security Presidential Directive 12 called for the establishment of a common government-wide standard for secure and reliable forms of identification for federal employees and contractors. That's set off a goal of increasing both the security of the issuance and vetting processes for government credentials for federal employees and contractors, as well as facilitating greater government efficiency through interoperability and interagency acceptance of credentials. The resulting standard, FIPS 201, the Personal Identity Verification Standard from NIST, specified the PIV card, and smart card-based ID card for government employees that contains PKI certificates. This has proven to be a very strong and flexible authenticator for both logical and physical access. And I think at its time, back in 2004, 2005, it was really ahead of its time. But it's been nearly 20 years now, and really the government systems that we use today look very different than they did 20 years ago. We're using many more externally hosted systems than we did in 2004, many of which do not necessarily support direct PKI authentication. We're using many more mobile devices whose platform capabilities and simply the size often makes it challenging to use smart cards and PKI credentials. But we're also seeing, new standards and technologies in broad use and with broad support today. Those mobile devices now that we use have, biometric sensors embedded on them, as well as secure hardware for storing cryptographic keys for credentials. And we have new standards and specifications for strong authentication, like FIDO and WebAuthn. The threats have evolved as well, really emphasizing the importance of strong phishing-resistant authentication to the applications. And this is something that we've always supported with the PKI credentials on the PIV card, but have often found, really difficult to use to their full potential. So when we talk about PIV, a lot of people, initially jump right to the PIV card itself, or maybe the PKI credentials. But in reality, PIV has always been much more than just the card and just those PKI credentials. In essence, it is, the federal government's approach to centralized identity management for federal employees and contractors, rooted in those, common standardized processes for, issuance, vetting, and authentication that we have in the PIV suite. Admittedly, this isn't always how, we've thought about it, and it isn't always how agencies have architected their, identity management solutions as a whole. But this is really where we want to focus the effort as we, move into this next phase of modernizing the PIV architecture. Now, the PKI credentials themselves that we use have provided, a means to an end of achieving those security and interoperability goals of PIV. But that doesn't mean they have to be the exclusive way to meet those goals. So for the last about 4 years now, we've been working to really, start to modernize the PIV standards and guidelines to take advantage, as Ryan said, of these new technologies and standards that we see today that have the potential to, better support current use cases and mission needs at agencies. This includes both the revision of the PIV standard itself, FIPS 201-3, that we released in 2022, as well as the ongoing work that we have going on now to update the technical specifications in the 800 series. A lot of this work is focused on facilitating adoption of new phishing-resistant authenticators as derived PIV credentials. And when I say that, what I really mean is additional authenticators that could be bound to the employee's authoritative identity records in the agency identity management system that would be managed in sync, really, with the PIV card credentials as well. What we're looking for here is central identity management of all of these authenticators so that they always reflect an employee's current status. Earlier in January, we released a draft of a revision of our derived PIV credentials publication, 800-157 revision 1. And really what, allowed us to do this is some of these advances that we've seen in authentication mechanisms facilitated by things like WebAuthn and FIDO that give us new options for phishing resistance. So the draft of 800-157 revision 1 allows new forms of authenticators to be used as derived PIV credentials, including non-PKI credentials like FIDO and WebAuthn. Really, it comes with about three major, criteria. One, the authenticator must be phishing resistant. It must meet the 863 revision 4 requirements at AAL2 or AAL3, and it must be bound to that user's, PIV identity count, those authoritative records. Now, as we've sought to accommodate, this model of additional authenticators, we've also had to rethink the approach to how to achieve the interoperability properties that we need from PIV. And historically, we focused on interoperability of the authenticator or the credential, but now we're really focusing on using federation as the interoperability layer for PIV. So, and some of this is simply functional. One agency can't directly verify a WebAuthn credential that's being managed by another. But also, federation protocols really provide a more flexible architecture to accommodate new applications and new authenticators and to share additional attributes to make authorization decisions. So concurrently with those derived PIV guidelines, we also released a draft on PIV Federation, SP 800-217 back in January, that lays out those high-level objectives for what PIV federation architectures and implementations need to achieve. The what, not so much the how. So, we ultimately recognize that more work is going to be needed to help agencies and help implementers, build out, and use PIV Federation in both a secure and interoperable manner. So we see a need for developing additional guidance, resources, and standards profiles to ease adoption. And that includes things like profiles of federation protocols. 217 does not reference or any existing federation protocol profiles for OpenID Connector SAML, and we think that will be an important thing for agencies to have as they proceed with implementation. So that's something that we'll be working both with agencies and working with standards organizations to work on. And finally, looking ahead, we're preparing for this, future migration to quantum-resistant cryptography that's likely to be quite painful. Soon NIST will release some draft standards on the post-quantum resistant algorithms, but there remains a lot of work to really update the foundational technical standards to accommodate those new algorithms. So we have an ongoing project of the NCCOE looking at how to help organizations identify what will need to be migrated, as well as some work looking at technical approaches to ease that migration, like use of hybrid certificates that have both quantum-resistant algorithms and classical algorithms. But this is going to be a long pull. There's a lot of work to do, and a lot of this work will feed into the next PIV revision cycle, which I guess gives me some job security in the meantime. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan to finish us off.
Yeah, and for the folks who manage the atomic clock, we've not done a great job managing our clock right now. So I'm going to try and fly through a couple of these things real quick. Promoting greater federation interoperability identity solutions. This is a key outcome for us. I'm not going to dive into why it's important. I think everyone in here probably has a really good understanding of why standardization is important and why being able to have interoperability, particularly at the global level, is absolutely critical to supporting the exchange of information, the advancement of international economic interests. So I think everyone's got a pretty decent understanding of that. But I did want to highlight a couple of things on here and then make sure we did give everyone a good chance for some questions around the roadmap. So what are the things that we're doing? I think Andy and Ketan have both talked very extensively about the work that we're doing in international standards bodies. It doesn't just focus on mobile driver's license and just W3C and WebAuthn and stuff like that, but also looking at a broader set of capabilities within ISO. This includes work we're doing around privacy engineering, but also we want to highlight the fact that we're doing a lot at the international level outside of standards bodies to help coordinate and engage across different governments and different groups. So one of the things I wanted to discuss and at least give a highlight on is our Trade and Technology Council. So this is something that was stood up as part of the administration to help engage between the European Union and the United States and establish better and more consistent engagement on technology topics. Within the Trade and Technology Council, we actually have a specific working group that is focused on nothing but digital identity. Within that group, we've started to have conversations with the European Union and the European Commission, the folks leading the EIDAS 2.0 effort, and we actually kicked off last week some planning efforts to do a mapping exercise. And I know everybody loves mapping exercises, but this is going to be the best mapping exercise ever. And really the goal here is to focus on not necessarily making everyone speak the same language, but being able to easily and effectively translate what people are saying and what they mean within their frameworks, so we know that we're generally close to each other. So we're going to start off with kind of a taxonomy mapping. How does our terms, how do our concepts, how do they align, how do they disalign? Where can we make some effort to understand how those challenges might exist? Then we're going to move into conversations about how do we map our assurance levels. For those of you familiar with the IDAS, they still have LOA 1 through 4. We have IALs 1, 2, and 3, AALs 1, 2, and 3, and FALs 1, 2, and 3. How can those things map up and how can we identify within those structures common sets of controls so we can understand how trust can flow between those different frameworks? And then the last thing we want to do within that is start to map out what are the international standards that we're each using and we're each referencing so that we can start to feed into pre-standardization coordination, pre-standardization research to be able to better coordinate what we're doing and what we're bringing as contributions to international standards bodies and hopefully build in some of that international interoperability from the start. We're also doing that as kind of a jumping off point for some of the stuff that Andy was talking about from a profiling perspective. How can we establish common profiles across different governments that have very common use cases to be able to support the technical interoperability that we need from the start? So how can we take things like OIDC, OAuth, SAML, OpenID for verifiable presentations, whatever it might be, and be able to start to arrive on what are the options we all like for government use cases, what are those options we want to make sure are included in something for government use going forward, and how do we make sure that those don't deviate too much across different government implementations that are going forward. So that's all very early days, but we want to make sure that we start to have those conversations. Things are starting to align a bit on certain concepts. We want to make sure that we're getting in on the front end as far as trying to establish and set the conditions for global or at least cross-border interoperability in specific use cases. So those are some of the main efforts we have going on. There's a bit more here, but again, I do want to leave some time for questions from you all. But I did want to hit real quick, how can you get involved? The roadmap is out. Please provide comments. There will be a link at the end of this if you all want to, when you get this, you want to provide comments. If you want to leave now and go start working on your comments, we would not be offended by that. Engage at the NCCOE, so we have the MDL project there, we've got a Zero Trust project there, we have our post-quantum projects there, we have tons of cool projects there. Go shop around on the website, find out the ones you're interested in, engage. It doesn't even have to be identity, I won't be offended. Participate in our workshops. We are planning on having a workshop later this summer on 863 digital identity guidelines to provide an update. We'll probably also provide an update on the roadmap there as well too. Hopefully it will be finalized by then because I've got such great feedback from everybody. And then finally, if you want to email more informally and just say, hey, let's get together and have a conversation. I, in fact, did mean to take my email address out of this, but I did not. So if you want to take advantage of it and send me an email, please feel free to do so. So I think we've got about 5 minutes left, so we did want to open it up for questions for any one of us, any of the topics, things about the roadmap, or if you all just want to leave 5 minutes early, I'm not going to argue with that either. Go ahead.
Do you want to click to the one? Do you want to click?
Question for you, Ketan. The mobile driver's license, is that, you're talking about international interoperability, but are we looking at possibly one ID going across all government documents, if you will, like say social security card or not just driver's license? That's one thing, just going across all government, US government ones. And then possibly the same digital identity going to business side somehow? Or are we going to have lots of digital identities?
There is a lot, right? There's a lot going on right now. And it's best to do baby steps at a time, right? Not too much all at once. So it's really important for us to just focus on mobile driving license for now. I know that other countries are already doing this. They are also involved in the writing of the standard. In US, it's a driving license document, and PII is very important. It's important everywhere, but it's not your central credential in US. But whereas if you go to Europe, it's your digital identity, that's everything, right? So different countries have different needs and it means different things to different countries. So for us, we have to look at how do we do this in US? How do we do this properly in US? If you have successfully done some good use cases with driving license, and it works and people find it useful and it protects PII, then we can kind of extend to other document types, your insurance card or your library card. It all depends, right? Who are the adapters of the technology? So as it is defined in the standard, it's extensible. So it can adapt, you can adapt this, you can use the same technology for other documents. You just have to create your own, as they say, claim types.
Yeah, I just want to be
so
super clear. Nothing we're proposing is a single identity or single credential or national identity at all. We envision a world where there's going to be multiple credentials, there's going to be multiple options for end users, and we're not suggesting anything like that. So, any other questions?
So back to mobile driver's licenses, my area of my passion is remote identity proofing and secure bootstrapping of second factors. So I think the comment was made that the standard for MDL will require the private key to be stored on the device and will not be transferable to another device. So my question is around the conversations that are going around issuance right now and the work that's being done for issuance of, recovering your MDL, or what happens if you lose or your device is stolen. What's the thinking around that? I'm interested to know, because I think that's the hardest problem in identity management right now. And if you could share maybe what's being thought of or discussed around that issuance and or reissuance. Thanks.
Yes, so as this standard was developed, there was a lot of input taken from the issuers itself. And the way it is currently defined, you can have a very short-lived driving license credential. It could be a month, it could be less than a year. It's up to the issuer to decide what is the expiration of this driving license. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that the issuer is going to have to keep track of licenses that they issue. So you could have a customer that wants driving license on 2 devices. So they have to manage each one of those driving licenses that they issue. If you lose your device, the only thing you can do is you have to go back to your issuer to get a license on another device. These licenses are, for a reason, very short-lived. And that's the way we should start and see how things go.
Okay, I think we got time for one more, as long as it's not a long question. No? Okay. Thank you very much for having us. Okay. I did not bring any peanut butter. It's incredibly expensive. But if you come out to campus, you can see a jar and a case. Cool. Thank you very much. We appreciate y'all taking the time.